It's simply the best. Better than all the rest. Under $1,000. OnePlus sent this phone my way to take on a test drive, share some thoughts, the OnePlus 12. This video is going to be a little bit longer and just sharing some thoughts as we kind of compare this phone across the market. There's always a component of personal preference. You might have a bias towards a specific feature or a familiarity with one brand, but putting a bucket of parts together and making it a little pocket computer, there really isn't a better overall option at this price. I don't really do unboxings and I don't really read the specs at people, so if you need to see the full list, you can go to oneplus.com, or better, you can go to GSM Arena, scan those numbers, and come on back here. I believe we should generally talk about 4 tiers of phones: entry-level, mid-range, premium, and ultra. Techies get real hung up on the individual phone names and debating what a flagship is, but we're often really bad at comparing on fair criteria. And consumers in general are real bad at the extremes. And we all know people who will compare the cheapest Windows PC they can buy against the cheapest Mac they can buy and act like that's comparable, or the opposite, wanting to compare the best device of one manufacturer against the best device of another. You know, the flagship fight. So against Apple or Samsung, you have to grade Galaxy and iPhone on a curve with hundreds of dollar advantages. Those prices are above $1,000. Those are ultra tier devices. This phone that I've been test driving, the 16 gig of RAM, 512 gig of storage version, shows up at $899, full MSRP before pre-order and trade-in deals. It's a clear shot against phones like the iPhone 15 Plus and Galaxy S24 Plus. OnePlus has gone through a couple different brand identities, from a disruptive flagship killer label to a more mainstream manufacturer. Last year, the OnePlus 11 was a pivot back to a more disruptive pricing, but with more noticeable compromises. This year, the 12 is a straight up Pro or Plus kind of device, just without the Pro or Plus on the label on the box. I do have a gripe with that though, in the naming and the marketing. From the 8, 9, and 10 phones that were labeled proper Pro devices, we had an expectation that they were more expensive, but offered the best tech that OnePlus could deliver. The 12 is going to be declared more expensive than the 11, but it should be because it's a nicer phone with more premium features. I do actually think that's confusing for consumers, and a lot of reviewers won't bother to analyze that or dig much deeper to explain that to their audiences. When we fairly compare prices and features, there's no real significant compromise here. The screen is gorgeous, colorful, and crazy bright in bursts of viewing in direct sun, 1440p resolution, 120 Hz, LTPO scaling down to 1 cycle per second, and improved performance for dimming. That should help folks who are proving sensitive to these screen flashes. The haptics are nice and detailed, though I do kind of miss the sharper pluck feel on older OnePluses. This is a decently powerful motor and it's very responsive. And the speakers sound pretty great. And I like the change up on the button so that the power and volume are on the same side. The notification switch is now on the opposite side of the phone. But 2 important tech bits return. The USB port is properly USB 3.2 with support for video output. You can hook up external displays or XR glasses. I was really sad that this feature was omitted on the OnePlus 11 to bring costs down. Also, I know a lot of folks will be excited about this. Wireless charging is back. I'm not a big fan of wireless charging. I prefer investing in real fast charging over a cable. But across the board, in charging and battery tech, this is an area where OnePlus embarrasses Apple and Samsung. From completely empty, where the phone won't boot, to completely full, showing a 100% charge, the OnePlus 12 was able to finish this in 34 minutes and never got above a surface temperature of 97 degrees. I do not get the desire to put coils all over the place and trickle charge your phone at a higher temperature, cooking your battery faster, when 10 minutes plugged into a real fast charger is a whole day of runtime, and the phone charges cooler over a cable. North Americans really do have battery PTSD from owning iPhones and Galaxies. Like, you always have to be trickle charging every time you set the phone down because you know it's gonna take forever to fully charge your phone. And this year's been great for runtime out in the field. To do my empty to full battery test, I had 36% battery remaining. So I turned on the OnePlus high performance mode. I split screened a streaming movie to keep the screen locked at full manual brightness, and the other app in multitasking. I ran Geekbench tests over and over and over until the phone completely shut off. It took 2 hours and 2 minutes to get the phone to shut off from 36%. A little back of the napkin math, from a full charge, that should be roughly 6 hours of back-to-back CPU stress testing at max screen brightness. We used to be really happy with 6 hours of screen on time just doing basic phone things, LOL. This generation of hardware is offering up a really good performance per watt with great runtime out in the field. If you're running low and it only takes 15 minutes for a 60% charge, why are we bothered? Why are we putting coils everywhere? But yes, a bunch of techies, some of my closest tech reviewer pals, have been crying about wireless charging not being on other products like the OnePlus 11 and the OnePlus Open. And it's not only back here, but super fast wireless charging returns. AirVook is here. Connected to an 80-watt charger, this pad can charge your phone wirelessly up to 50 watts. So this phone can charge faster wirelessly than a Samsung or an Apple can charge over a cable. I'm becoming a broken record on this point too. Features have to matter when you compare phones, and not just celebrating one brand over another based on popularity. It matters that OnePlus has had way faster charging than other brands in North America. It fundamentally changes your relationship with your phone and how you're looking for power. It calms your battery anxiety. Apple and Samsung seem to want to sell you significantly more expensive accessories to constantly trickle charge your phone. If the trend changes and Samsung offers 60 or 80 watt charging, we know that tech journalists will celebrate that move. We know they'll show it off and act like it's a significant upgrade over the current generation of Galaxy phones, because it is. Why not celebrate it now? It's here today. And in any comparison between OnePlus and Samsung and Apple, you also have to grade Samsung and Apple on an additional charger curve. That those companies don't include any charger in the box, let alone a faster charger, so you have to buy that separately. The 80-watt charger from OnePlus is in the box for the OnePlus 12. You don't gotta spend a dime to get that crazy fast cabled charging. I get spicy about that charging conversation. Switching gears, the camera conversation is similarly stacked in OnePlus's favor this year. The main sensor is just a tiny bit larger than the main sensor on the iPhone 15 and the S24. We shouldn't see a significant change in the optical performance. Things like depth of field should be pretty close, but it's the newest stacked sensor tech from Sony, very similar to what we saw on the OnePlus Open, and a significant improvement in gathering light. Where the OnePlus really takes a lead though, the companion sensors. The iPhone is just that dual sensor setup with an adequate ultra-wide second camera. The Samsung ultra-wide, also a 12 megapixel shooter, and it's fine. But the Samsung telephoto is that tiny, dinky little 10 megapixel sensor that lies. And Samsung saves photos as 12 megapixel images. Samsung just makes up 20% of the resolution it saves. And it's not very useful unless you have excellent light. The OnePlus has larger sensors and higher resolutions across all three cameras, actually getting closer to a phone like the Pixel 8 Pro. Half-inch high-resolution sensor on the ultra-wide, and a new half-inch sensor on the telephoto with a proper periscope lens. One small upgrade over the Open, the telephoto lens seems to focus a little closer. I've never been tremendously impressed with macro modes from the ultra-wide camera. They can be fun to play with, but now that we're getting better close-up and macro photography from telephotos, much better image quality, much better compression of the scene behind your subject, depth of field, all of this is a little nicer when our zoom sensors can focus closer. And the larger telephoto sensor is so much more useful beautiful in dimmer conditions, nighttime shots, and indoor shots with cozy lighting. Across all of Oppo's phones, I wish there was a more straightforward video pro mode. Like, Samsung's app is really strong there, but image quality is just better across the board from this hardware, especially when you really live with a OnePlus and you get a feel for how the app handles processing. With any camera, you want to get to a point where you can kind of predict what the software is going to do before you hit the shutter. I totally get personal preferences on auto mode processing. If you've really lived with an iPhone, you know what to expect every time you hit that shutter. Even if it's bad, you know how it's going to be bad. But there's really no way to fight physics with what these sensors can do when you spend as much time getting familiar with the OnePlus cameras as most tech reviewers seem to be familiar with iPhone cameras. Because this has 3 lenses on the back, I'm sure we're going to see comparisons against the iPhone Pro. Sure, that's fair. 3 versus 3. Chatting out performance, it is tough to get a handle on what's Qualcomm and what's OnePlus management. With their new Trinity engine that's supposed to handle system hardware. It's supposed to keep everything running clean, and it can also boost gaming frame rates and keep apps persistent in memory longer. When I run my tests for video rendering, podcast mixing, photo processing, this is a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and it trades blows really well against its cousin, the iQOO 12. It's a powerful pocket computer. There are settings to change up the performance curve, and I'm happy to see that, as I am a grown-up. And if I want to tell my phone, work harder, use more battery, and get tasks done faster, I want to be able to tap into more of the compute power of the chip. Something Samsung no longer lets you do. I have a full breakdown of charts and graphs to see the results of that performance testing and where the OnePlus stacks up against the iQOO 12, the Vivo X100 Pro, and phones from last year. You can read about all of my testing on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. And the gaming claims help transition us over to talking about software, where it seems many more games this year can make use of the frame generation tech built into Qualcomm's GPU. On its own, it still seems like OnePlus manages performance, and it seems to keep a cap on a lot of games at 60 frames per second. But the game settings are now getting a lot more granular. There's a bit more to dig into, and this screen setting opens up higher frame rates, though they probably aren't native, but more like frame generation on NVIDIA graphics cards. Playing games like Alien Isolation, it's liquid smooth, and the phone doesn't run as warm playing the same game as the iQOO 12 did. But I think the iQOO 12 is actually generating 100 frames per second. So I need to play with this a little more to better understand the distinctions between these different modes. Suffice it to say, 60 frame per second gaming is low-hanging fruit these days for a lot of our mobile titles on a GPU that can kinda do battle with older discrete graphics cards like GTX 1050s. Our synthetic benchmark scores are closing in on 12th gen U series processors. Like, there's so much more you could be doing with your phone. But onto the rest of the software. I'm digging it. Oxygen has been polished up, and it now stands as a feature-packed skin with a really pretty animation engine. I think OnePlus is doing a great job now of incorporating gestures and conveyance into their UI. Like swiping up activates a floating window mode. We see the 3-dot menu to indicate there's extra functionality in multitasking. Locking apps should alleviate some of those issues people have where a program is cleared out of RAM when it's running in the background. And the gesture side panel, it brings in some of the functionality we saw on the OnePlus Open, like the clipboard for typing text on the keyboard. Now we can use this folder for recently used files. And OnePlus is improving support for dragging and dropping files across the whole phone. I'll be curious to see if OnePlus makes their own play for other AI services, but like Xiaomi, the first trick they're showing off is subject identification in all photos, not just in portrait mode photos, and the cutout on device is insanely good. Then in one clean swipe action, you can drag to a folder, switch to an art app, and drag the cutout with transparency onto another canvas. This Sketchpad app that had no prior support for that kind of advanced file management. As far as I can tell, That's all OnePlus. So eventually the claims will need to be examined, especially longer term performance optimizations, kind of like Huawei back in the day with EMUI. And of course, reviewers always spend time with OnePlus updates, like they do Apple and Samsung updates to test those claims, right? I'm going off script a lot on this one. But seriously, Oxygen is a good skin. It uses space more efficiently in your notification shade. It conveys additional functionality better than stock Android. It's got some fun customization tricks to play with, and it doesn't drag phone performance like skins used to back in the day. Whether or not you like it is a personal preference, but it's respectably feature complete and satisfies the demands I would put on a premium tier phone. This should sound pretty familiar up to this point because it's a lot of the same praise we delivered for the OnePlus Open. The 12 is very much an open that doesn't open. It's a collection of pieces that add up to a brutally competitive price to performance and a return to form for a brand that has always delivered premium tier devices undercutting Samsung and Apple. This year with fewer compromises than last year. There might be a specific individual feature that someone relies on, like Samsung DeX, and I totally get that. I love desktop modes like Moto Ready 4. But to get that feature on an S24 Plus, I would be bummed out by Samsung's cameras and their really slow charging. There's just nothing on an iPhone 15 I see giving this OnePlus any serious competition. And I don't want to completely discount familiarity. It matters that you understand your phone and you know what it can do. You're not always having to relearn new menus and settings. That increasingly means you're going to pay Samsung and Apple more for less. They're counting on you to downplay good competitive options and to pay them more and more money to maintain that familiarity. MSRP on the iPhone is just silly. Matching the 512 gig of storage, you're paying Apple $300 more, and the iPhone loses every single fight we can stage against the OnePlus. Screen tech, battery tech, camera tech, charging tech, processing and gaming, it's bad. The Galaxy is happily a little closer, but the 512 gig phone is going to run $200 more. And while it's a little closer for display and compute power, and has some fun features like DeX, it's still a slog of a fight for camera tech and loses badly for charging with a smaller battery. You have to give Samsung a $200 pad, and it's still not a victory for Samsung. It's just a closer fight. But Juan, the trade-ins and deals and pre-orders and sale, OnePlus has those too. During the launch sale, it's not hard getting a 512 gig OnePlus for the price of the 256 at $799, and they're throwing in trade-in deals on top of that also. That still puts Samsung roughly $200 more than the OnePlus 12. You pay a lot for the familiarity and brand loyalty. All right, now that we're nearing the end of this video, we've probably lost all of the really obnoxious, die-hard Apple and Samsung knights. There are probably still some folks bristling a bit because I've been really hard on Sam Apple in this video, but it's been pretty consistent to see every phone in some way compared against iPhone or Galaxy because reviewers need that tasty SEO and ad revenue. I'm kind of doing that in this video, right? But I don't see how someone can actually compare these brands fairly and not walk away with an extremely positive impression of OnePlus this year. The cardinal sin of a OnePlus, like LG in the past, this company isn't spending billions of dollars a year on marketing. So reviewers likely make less money on OnePlus videos unless they keyword pack iPhone and Galaxy in the video titles. And we know how punitive Samsung and Apple PR can be, and so we certainly don't want to show iPhones and Galaxies losing to a OnePlus, or even acknowledging that this could be an exciting option for consumers to consider. But I digress yet again. All right, being fair, this is also a really tough fight for Google in a Pixel 8 Pro showdown, and I'm gonna have a separate editorial out talking about my experiences there between these two phones. Likewise, I'm really anxious to see what Moto might do for an Edge Plus. Against the OnePlus, I think the Pixel is a better communicator. I think the Moto might be a better computer replacement, and the OnePlus might strike a better balance of those opposite ideas. We'll have to see. We'll have to do some deeper comparisons. The difference in my tone for Google and Moto, though, they aren't primarily promoting ultra expensive phones, hoping the hype will rub off on less competitive premium tier phones. Like the OnePlus 12, they're just really solid, nice phones hovering near $1,000. So I'm digging the 12. This is a brutally competitive year for OnePlus, from the Open to here, and I hope folks take this competition seriously. The tech game is a lot more fun when we say, vote with your wallet, and we really mean it. Techies should not be shrugging off good competition just because the manufacturer isn't spending $5 billion a year on marketing a label. I'm not being hyperbolic or clickbaity in the title of this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment. What phone really goes head to head with this in North America and can properly beat it in a price to performance and feature comparison? I expect the tastiest of hot takes down in the comments, and maybe smash that bell icon on your way down to comment, because algorithm. But if you really want to support your favorite content creators, this is a great time to go old school and maybe consider following in other ways, across social media, hitting up blogs, or even using an old school RSS reader so you can make your own list of YouTube videos free of the YouTube algorithm standing on our necks. But there's gonna be a lot more to say about the OnePlus 12. I've got comparisons, updates, and of course digging into this new camera tech, so stay tuned. The conversation has just gotten started, even though we know YouTube will treat this as a dead trending topic that's over after today. So I will of course leave some links down below where to find more information on the OnePlus 12 and to shop this bad boy online. As always, thanks so much for watching, sharing, subscribing to this channel. All the support lately has been absolutely fantastic. Those of you who are clicking on links in my video descriptions, maybe you're hitting my home site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, or maybe you're joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon. That's patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals in the universe, and they get exclusive access to my charts and notes. As I'm testing new phones and doing all of that performance work, they get the first look at what these phones can do. They're basically the coolest tech pals in the universe, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere, but these days I'm spending a bit more time on the Mastodons, a little on the Threads, some time on the Flickrs, showing off some of these really cool camera samples, a lot less so on the Instagrams and the Facebooks, and definitely not on the Twitters, and I will catch you all on the next review.